So I want to open up by introducing myself. My name is Raymond. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the state of Connecticut. I wanted to thank the Connecticut Technology Council for having invited me here to help facilitate what I hope will be a very informative session. We have a great group of panelists to engage in, I think, some interesting conversation. I haven't really seen a setup before with tissues on the table. I don't know if it's related to the topic of the future of the CIO. I hope that that's not where it comes from, but we'll see where the conversation goes from here. Just a little bit about myself and then about the format of what we're going to do today. I've been in the technology business for about 24 years. I was a computer engineering major from UConn. So Connecticut boy, came up through the consulting ranks, and the last 2.5 years have been in the CIO role for the state of Connecticut. If you know anything about a governmental CIO, you'll know that we have a very interesting job, and that we're in just about every kind of business that there is. So we're in economic development, we're in voting registration, we're in prisons and policing, and we're in economic development. And so where many other areas you can really segment in on a certain kind of business, the technology job within government is probably one of the most varied and one of the most interesting that you'll find. So I have a huge challenge that's ahead of us, but I also love my job every day, and I think we're making a big difference for folks that are out there. So a little bit about today's format. We have a panel. We're going to discuss a topic about sort of the evolving role of the CIO and the future of that, but we also want to make this interactive. So in general, what we're going to do is get a sort of a brief update from the panelists on who they are, so you can understand who you're engaging with. I have a set of facilitated questions that will get the conversation going, and then I'm going to roam the room with a microphone, asking questions of the panel, but also engaging you in that conversation as well. One of our panelists, I won't tell you who, sort of called this the Phil Donahue thing. And if you're old enough to remember Phil Donahue, then you'll know why I wouldn't call out our panelists. So clearly I don't have the Jay Leno kind of skills that will entertain you the entire time, but I think that the topic will do just that. So before we get going into the formal topic, I'd like to have my panel introduce themselves to you and tell them a little bit about themselves before we get going. So we could start with Richard.
Hi, I'm Rick Bucchi. I have been in the Hartford area and Connecticut area all my life. I've been in technology for 36 years, of which 23 of those years have been CIO. So I don't know quite if you're here to figure out how not to be a dinosaur or see one. It's hard to tell how a dinosaur can survive, but I would say I've had 9 different jobs in those 36 years and 9 different industries. So I started in insurance and now went to healthcare, done a sweep through distribution, software companies, and merger and acquisitions, and held different jobs with the CIO role in technology. Always been part of technology in those 36 years, but ran and merged call centers, did a stint of sales and marketing in one organization, and did a lot of operations and implemented EMR in another organization, so electronic medical records. So I think one of the biggest things that I have to share about not being a dinosaur is trying to be flexible in your career and how you look at your career, and maybe go with the energy and not resist to what you always know and always are comfortable with.
Thank you. John? Oh, sorry.
Joe, it's okay.
Joe.
That's well said, actually. I'm just going to say ditto. No. I've held CIO positions from Wall Street to Main Street, and have had to take a hard look at my own style and how I'm working and how effective I am almost really on an annual basis, and have made a lot of the shifts, you know, and also tried to make them ahead of the curve, so I don't become a dinosaur. And it's you know, it's a lifelong effort, learning experience to do that. Currently I'm the global CIO for Reader's Digest. We're more than that little magazine that you leave in the bathroom. We are we have over 75 publications worldwide. We have a large direct marketing business internationally. We have 140 million customers. So it's a really neat, you know, B2C kind of arrangement. We also move into B2B and dealing with customer lists and so on, which maybe not everyone wants to hear about. And we stopped mailing magazines to dead people. I just want to let you know that. We have better analytics than that. At Standard & Poor's, I was there for 7 years, just about 7 years, through the financial crisis, and helped our company navigate out of the financial crisis. And then prior to that, I had worked in insurance, Hartford Life, which I loved. Also had the investment products group there. Actually, this is a topic that's really something on everyone's mind when they come and talk to me, particularly, well, I'll get into it later. I won't take up too much time now. Go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. Lud?
So, Lud Johnson, I'm the CIO at Middlesex Hospital, and I do find my job exciting every day. Healthcare is in such turmoil, and healthcare is so complex in what we do. Not a day goes by where there aren't new challenges. I've been in business for 40 years. 30 of those I have been a CIO, and that obviously predates the term CIO, because in those days you were the director of IT or you were manager of data processing, but the head IT person. Starting in 1984, I did something slightly unusual. After working for 12 years with a Fortune 100 company and then going to Touche Ross to become a consultant, I ended up in a situation where I turned around a hospital's financial system as the project manager, and they offered me a job. And this was in 1984, when healthcare was 6% of the GNP. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. I did a couple years as consulting. So I took the job as a consultant, and I've been doing that as a consultant ever since. I've been at Middlesex for 23 years as a consultant, but I'm a vice president, the CIO there. I managed to basically have 4 other hospitals that are clients and about 8 people that service the needs of those hospitals and physician groups. So I've been able to actually stay in one place kind of for a long period of time, but have enough exposure to other stuff. And for any of you who saw James Brown, who talked about plagiarism, I'm an expert at it. I get to go into at least 4 different places at any point in time and see what I think is good and take it to the other places. So it really is interesting. But healthcare is a phenomenally interesting place to be, as most of you all can't read the papers without some kind of problems with healthcare or without some discussion about it.
Agreed. So I think you'll agree that we have a great panel to discuss this topic with us today. So thank you for introducing yourselves and for being a part of this. I spend a lot of my time lately talking to agency leaders, agency commissioners, deputies, and other leaders about the possibilities of what their business can look like with technology. And it sort of strikes me that that's perhaps a non-traditional role for the CIO, and I think a good launching point for our first set of top questions. There was a book that was written in 2009 by Richard Hunter and George Westerman on the real value of IT. And one of the concepts in that book is about the CIO plus. And the concept in general, it's a good read, but the concept is that the CIO is getting into a lot of different business and has the ability to move up within the organization, move laterally within the organization, and bring more to the table. So I'm going to use that as a launching point for our first question for the panel. And it's basically this. If you were able to add as many letters as you wanted to the CIO title that would describe where your role is going, what would you add and why? And we'll start with Lud and we'll work our way down through.
So I'm in a little bit different circumstance as to what gets added there. And largely because the two things that often get added in my arena is RN and MD. Healthcare is actually somewhat different than the rest of the industry in that it's dominated by women. There's more women in healthcare than there are men by a long shot. And there's a lot in my department. I have 47 people. There's the largest single contingent of staff that work in my organization are RNs or some kind of clinician. I also have a couple of MDs. Now they tend not to make great CIOs, but there are some that transcend and go on and become great CIOs. If you look at the state of Connecticut, in the hospital arena, and I'll usually refer to the hospital arena, there's a significant amount of women RNs, and a lot of them have come up through the clinical side. So it's very important to understand the clinical business when you're in information technology now, because not a day goes by that I don't have somebody come to me because they want to buy some system that they saw. And you have to actually be able to learn how to say no politely and explain to them why, so that they don't leave mad, which is usually what happens. But the business, the real important ones are having very good, I mean, I have a degree in business administration, undergrad, and a master's degree in management. Understanding business, understanding the business you're in. So in healthcare, if you understand the business you're in, and then translating that into a technical plan is really very, I mean, that's the important skill, being able to do that.
Very great, thank you. Joe?
Yeah, the initials I would add are BIW, because I look at my role as making sure that the best idea wins. And that it can come to market and add value. And it's taking me an entire career to actually reach that point, to see the role that way. I have many of my business partners through the years come to me and say, you know, Joe, we're really looking for a legacy CIO. And I'm there like, you don't want me, you know. But they say that. They say, well, you know, we got this other CIO, he's a great product guy, et cetera. We decentralized everything. It all went, we're spending all kinds of money, and we need to bring some discipline back, right? And I remember being the legacy, I didn't have as much gray hair, but I remember being kind of the legacy guy who thought, as I climbed the ladder in these companies, that I would have more control, more autonomy, right, and be able to make more decisions. It's exactly the opposite. It is really, it's the higher it went up, I found I have more constituents, I have more relationships to deal with. Of the logistics around getting things done, and to do it with that art, do it in a way that's artful so that everyone can still invite each other to dinner in the evening and not be angry at each other, right? So a big part of my role is to set up these environments, whether it's organization, funding, opportunities for people to take that next horizon step, and to create that environment so that we can let 1,000 flowers bloom. And I don't control all of it anymore. All I do is I make sure that we operate from a set of principles, generally around integrity, about how we want to treat our customers and our coworkers, that I've set up the environments and capabilities so that people can create and go forward, and that I can advocate for a point of view strongly enough so if there's a really good idea out there that can make a lot of money for our shareholders, that will do that. And that's actually how I've had to evolve from that role, because I grew up during the time, in my career, during the times when the CIO was, quote unquote, a god. Little did we know that he or she wasn't. And there weren't many she's in those days, in those roles. And I thought, I thought they would have this incredible control over things. And so the key thing is to spark and make sure that creativity can come to market without having to be a bottleneck in the process. And then to be a strong advocate. There have been times, many times, where I've put my career on the line advocating a point of view and having a stake in the outcome and driving something to market. I also require my staff to come in at least once a year to come up with a product idea and try to sell it. Right? It may not go anywhere. And so those are the, if you get an idea of kind of where I've seen the evolution go. So if you ask me, is the CIO role, traditional CIO, dead? No, it's not, because they're still asking for the legacy CIO. But it's dying. You will not have a seat at the table unless you can get on that other side of the equation.
Yeah. In some respects, sounds like it's the chief meritocracy officer.
Yeah, it is.
Rich, how about you? What kind of letters would you add to the future of the CIO?
Well, I would add CTS, and that would be change to survive. And it's a lot of what Joe just talked about. If I look at Evolution 1, we're a hosted software solution that takes care of third-party administrator healthcare claims. So we have our customer is a third-party administrator, and then their customer is the company, which has the health plan, and then the company obviously has the employee. So the people actually touching our card to swipe the card at the pharmacy for their FSA and the HSA claims is really the employee, but we never actually get to see that end customer. So our customer is really the third-party administrator. So we have different levels of customers that we never see. So if I look at the CIO role there, I agree with a lot of things that Joe talks about, in that you just have to be aware of what the latest and the greatest pressure point is on you. And for example, ours right now, that I feel personally, is obviously security. We're in the cloud, where we got all the HIPAA requirements coming at us. We have PCI for payment card industry. If you do anything to process credit cards or debit cards, you get PCI. You have the SSA 16. We're a private company, so we don't have the SOX, but sooner or later, public companies will have all the SOX regulations on them. We now, with the new omnibus rulings in healthcare, we get audited by our business associates. So we're not only audited by our internal audits, by the PCIs, by the HIPAA audits that we do for ourselves with our independent auditors, we have to entertain audits from our customers that come in. So a lot of that is becoming forefront for the IT, because IT has to be at that audit. 90% of that audit is, what's your data center look like? What's your change management? What's your controls in place? And you have to spend a couple of days with these auditors. So to me, you have to be aware of, where's the heat coming from? And obviously the security with all the hacking going on, especially in healthcare, you look at everything that's happening in healthcare, you have to pay attention to that. You have to pay attention. You have, if you have a violation of 500, for example, if we lose, if 500 cards get violated, or if we send a bad file to somebody that it goes to a different company, if it's 500 or more, or a laptop gets stolen that has HIPAA information on the laptop that's not encrypted, you have to go to the press. You know, if you have 500 accounts on there or more, you have to go to the press. You have to disclose it out to the press. So more and more things like that are coming, and the CIO has to deal with all that. They have to be way ahead of that curve, just to make sure keep your organization out of trouble.
Thank you for that. I take some heart into us not being the only one that are going through all those kinds of audits. So it's good to know that the private industry is a part of that as well. Now I'm going to turn this over to you for a little bit, and if you have some follow-up questions to where the panel went, or if you have something else that you want to sort of take slightly off topic as it relates to the future of the CIO, let me know. And if you ask a question or introduce yourself first,
Hi, my name is Brian Molinari. I'm an infrastructure consultant with Mohegan Sky. But my question is a follow-up for Rick. You just went into detail about a lot of impact that security is having on your IT organization. Does that provide you with an opportunity to kind of go back to your business leaders who are deciding what it takes to produce your product in terms of your cost? And do they realize what the security component of that cost is, and are you a primary player now at the table to say, hey, we got to build this into our product offerings and understand that for us to be competitive and satisfy the needs of the customers that are going to come in this with all these audits and requirements, we got to invest in the ability to either have the technology to turn around what our risk posture looks like, or to have the additional workforce to sit with these auditors that are coming through on a regular basis.
Good question. Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate in that the organization, one, we're private. We're owned by a private equity company in San Francisco. That's good and bad sometimes. Sometimes they just look at the dollar and say, how much revenue you're bringing in. But I've always been fortunate in that organization, starting back when the organization was Evolution Benefits, and some of you may have known or heard of Bob Petroselli's had a lifelong career in healthcare in Connecticut, and he was the founder and CEO of Evolution Benefits that is now Evolution One. But one of the things I learned from him that I really appreciated, he was a guy that really got it, that you needed to invest, and you needed to invest in technology if you could prove it to him. So I've been fortunate, even through the transition of this organization into Evolution One, that we've always had a good capital budget. We've always had a good ability to prove the technology, because the technology was our product, or is our product still. So that made it a lot easier, and probably a little bit, probably a lot more easier than most companies, and certainly a lot easier than my prior existing companies in my career. So that's been pretty easy. I can honestly say I've really never had a problem if I justify it going after and getting money. I think, as an example, this compliance and getting ready for all the compliance, getting ready for all the audits that we're going through, getting your policies and procedures in place, been a little bit of a struggle, but now that the whole organization is seeing the impact of getting audited by so many people, even that's getting a lot easier to get that money and to get the time and talent put aside to get that stuff done.
Any of our other panelists want to add to that?
Well, I had to really work on, if you're in a B2C environment like we are, with the various consumers we have, I mean, definitely for PCI and so on, we actually sourced that out, so that we wouldn't have to carry all that information and scrutiny for audits. But we had to build some awareness among the team on what could happen. And then we do have a monthly report that's prepared, and I brought in the role of a chief security officer for our company, who provides a monthly report on everything from intrusion attempts to other things I won't talk about. But it took some time to get the awareness there, and then we have been able to invest to protect our systems. I don't think we could stand up to China coming after us, but then I don't know what we would really have as value to China for intelligence. But I think there's more work to do there. We could have someone say something, out in the media, because we have spokespeople for our company that go to the doctor's show and all this other stuff. And they might say something that could really tick people off, and we can get creamed, because you can go on the internet and you can buy a program to go slam any site you want. Just make sure your credit card can't be traced. So there are still levels that we have to protect and take care of.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Bud, did you want to add anything?
So, and I've been lucky, I try to avoid this like the plague, because all of those things are very time consuming, and I have a person who works for me that does those things. So, IT, I mean, we're not in as threatening a position. I mean, people don't necessarily want to hack in and get your medical record, because there's, you can't sell it to China or to Russia and create get money from a medical record. You can personally damage someone, but those people don't have the skill set to hack into it. So I like to think that we are not as vulnerable because we just don't have the information that people want. We are careful whenever we do we outsource. If we do take a credit card, we don't store it in our system. We do it with a credit card company and make sure that it doesn't hit our system. So we have HIPAA that we have to worry about, and HIPAA's interesting. I sat on a panel for the state, and I was the only, let's say, person representing the provider network, the people who provide health care to the patients. Everyone else was some kind of a lawyer for public rights, and basically some kind of evangelist on some privacy committee, and they were rabid. And so we had it at the state building, and they had this circular thing, and there was a button you would press, and you would speak, and you would lean into it. And so these people are saying, we are patient advocates. We are patient advocates. And in particular, this state went with an opt-out for health information exchange, which means the patient has to opt out of it. By default, they go into it. And they were like, we're patient advocates. And so I pressed the button and I said, let me correct you on that. You're not patient advocates. I'm worried about taking care of patients. And I'm worried that the physician, the clinician, the nurse has the information they need to take care of the patients. You're worried about the one minuscule part of the process where somebody finds out that somebody is a drug addict and they lose their job, which is very minuscule. What happens every day in healthcare is decisions are made about people's lives, and they need to have as much information as they can. So I tend to really push the envelope on HIPAA. We have people who basically try and push back, but I always try to make sure that the clinicians get all the information they need. So that's a tough battle. I mean, it's a little different for you and for me, but I try to minimize preventing being able to use the data and taking a little bit of risk in that range.
Thank you. I think that question, do you have a follow-up?
Not a follow-up.
All right, well, we'll move back to, I think that the broader question that hit on is, what's the value of IT? And so as traditional data centers and cloud services sort of leads to the commoditization of many of the roles that we face in the IT space, how does your organization measure value? And what are the steps you take to communicate and demonstrate that kind of value? And we'll start with Rich.
Well, I'm a little unique in that our technology value is our product. So we'll do 4 releases a year, and I would say, depending how well or how not so well those releases go, will determine our value. That combined with service level agreements that we'll have with our customers on availability and uptime, because we we are a hosted software solution. Those are actually always monitored on a monthly basis, reviewed with the customer. A lot of big customers on a quarterly basis. They're in our master service agreements with some of those customers as well. So, so the organization, and it's a little bit different too, because our product design and product development group is within IT as well. So I struggle with that a little bit sometimes, where the old dinosaur in me, if you would say that, you know, that should really be separate a little bit, because you sort of lose a little bit of the control when you have your product think tank in your IT organization, because we basically call our IT organization R&D, research and development. So I struggle with that sometimes, that department is within IT, because I think it has a way to minimize those checks and balances, and you might be putting in something that IT may think it's ready to be put in, but product may not, and the IT guy is running the show, so he may just be putting it in. So I'm a big check and balance guy. I think we lose some of that, but all of those things combined, the SLAs and our product basically is the value that we have to the organization. So it's pretty unique, I guess, when that question comes up, that if you're a software solution provider, that's your value, and you see it every day with your customer.
Great, thanks, Rich. Joe, how do you measure and define, communicate the value of IT?
Well, you know, I agree that, you know, at Reader's Digest we have digital products, so in many ways we're valued on the metrics we have around customer experience and subscriptions and advertising and so on, and how well those products are received in the marketplace. And at Standard & Poor's, we delivered basically software that contained analytics and data to the financial centers around the world. So from that standpoint, a lot of our metrics are what would any kind of digital business metrics would be. And then on the traditional business side, it's a little bit more challenging, and it can also be challenging in the digital space, because the language of technology often is project delivery dates, the cost of a various project. It could be, we speak often about maybe some of the relationships we'll have with suppliers and service levels and so on. And one thing I learned was really to tap into the way the language is being used in the senior offices, and what kind of language they use in explaining value to one another and to the board. So in one case, Reader's Digest, a lot of it's financial metrics. So I have to have a little bit of financial engineering in my software engineering, you know, and be able to explain them in deep financial metrics. At S&P, you know, the language was a lot about the quality of everything from ratings to the analytics and the quality of the metrics there. And then the time to market, speed and time to market was important, as well as the financial metrics. At Hartford Life, when I was leading the investment product systems team, it was all about basis points on products. What were the basis points on the cost of the product? What were the basis points associated with the margin that we were bringing in? And I think it's key that if you really want a seat at the table, is that you just hone in on the way they, not just the metrics that are important to you, but the metrics that are important to them, and really hone in on the language that they use. And I think that communication is absolutely critical for being accepted in the club. And I've actually had to do a lot of work there, because the financial engineering side of a business is actually quite complicated, and to understand all the subtle mechanisms where if you push one side of the equation, what happens to the other. It takes some time to learn that, and I really recommend people spend time learning that.
That is emerging as a critical skill. You're absolutely right. But how do you measure and communicate the value of IT?
So we've got a couple of other dimensions, but basically we break things down into market expansion. So healthcare, yeah, I've been in it, again, 30 years. You know, the name of the game is more volume. Now, that's the name of the game for the past decade. So one way we measure volume is how can we do more things? And so that becomes a cost justification. So whenever we have IT systems, and for me it's a little bit trickier because there's a blending now of biomed which reports to me. I have a little bit more than what might be in the non-healthcare world considered not traditional CIO type work. I have the biomed group, which basically buys all of the biomedical machines, the physiological monitors. I, for instance, spearheaded the purchase of the Da Vinci robot for $2 million at Middlesex Hospital. I also have planning, and basically by that I mean I do market analysis, and I have analysts that do a lot of the research on how we're doing market share. So I measure market share. We buy equipment, radiology equipment, based upon more market share. Those things all tie into a PACS system in IT. So they become it's a way that I become almost a money maker. So when we evaluate technology, we often use market expansion, volume growth. And frankly, that's been the name of the game. We've been adding new services forever. That's why there's more things you can get done in healthcare now than you could last year and the year before and the year before, and that's one of the reasons why it's gone up so much. I will get into how that's changing so you won't hate me so much. Cost improvement, basically, and efficiency. When I put in electronic health record systems, and Rick knows this, they are bears to put in. And for me to say this, he's probably thinking, you better hope nobody else out there is in IT. For me to say that a health electronic record makes a physician and a nurse more productive, basically we've labored them with a whole lot of documentation and a process that's very difficult. We are coming out of that because we've been in a very, I mean, where we were in healthcare 10 years ago, you know, not even half as many people were actually interacting with computers. Now they all are, and they all spend 2 or 3 hours a day. But we've figured out ways to improve productivity now with the systems. The other thing that's very big for us is patient safety. So I've got a bunch of metrics, and this is, you know, when we talk about the value, it's really a lot about what we decide what to do. I also am the one for the hospital who manages the capital budget process. We spend about $30 million a year in capital budgeting, and we have matrices that try to rate and compare all of these things. We get $55 million worth of requests, and we spend about $30 million. And how do we triage that? We use these 3 basic categories, and then we try to, and it's tricky. I mean, we've come up with some ways. There is a basic premise in healthcare. If you save one patient life, whatever the cost of that project is generated. It just doesn't work. I got $1 million project that's gonna save 1 life, and I'm taking care of 1.7 million patient encounters in a year. So we can't use that logic, but usually that's what you get from the clinician. So we have to figure out a patient safety matrix per dollar type of thing. So we break it down into those 3 areas usually as we justify. Now, the name of the game that I'm working on now is effective utilization of healthcare and population management. Making sure that the patient gets the right service at the right time and trying to keep them healthy. The incentives are moving away from volume-based, and they're moving into this managed care, population management. Now we're in that transition, and over the next 5 to 10 years, that transition is probably going to be dramatic, and we'll be being more interested in being effective in our delivery of care. Those are the 4 matrix we use.
Great. I think that it's very interesting that you describe all of your IT value in the context of the businesses that you're in. And I think that's one of the underlying themes of the role of the CIO is that unless you're tied into your business, you're
Yeah.
not really adding value if you're just focusing on the technology. Still have a question? That's quite all right. The format is follow-up question or go someplace else. So introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Tracy Sims with Edge Technology Services, and I guess, being in the staffing business, I'd kind of like to get your perspective on, outsourcing was a big initiative, and I'd like to kind of get your perspective on where you think the future, do you think outsourcing will continue, or do you think, that some of the business now is coming back? Like, what are your feelings as far as if it was a success, the outsourcing initiative, or, if any of you have been involved in that, what your thoughts on that are?
You wanna take- Well, when I had.
I'll go next, go ahead.
I try to make this short, so I know we could talk about this the whole time. I had really helped conduct 2 studies on outsourcing back in 1999 as we were wrapping up Y2K and where the industry might go. And we had looked at cost arbitrage back then. I'd worked with one of the former actuaries where I was at the time. And we put together kind of a matrix of costs and expected inflation, et cetera. And we thought the outsourcing cost arbitrage would last for about 25 years with all the different mechanisms that were happening. Then in 2010, when I was at S&P, we noticed that the cost arbitrage was eroding very quickly. And I got our chief economist as well as our equity research group together that actually watched that industry. And we did some metrics around Indian outsourcing, and guess when the cost arbitrage, when the 2 lines, the US costs and forget about productivity, et cetera, we're just talking about costs, guess where they really start to intersect, depending on geography and a lot of other ranks. What year do you think they intersect?
2005.
They start in 2013.
Wow.
Right? And by the way, if you talk to the senior staff with the outsourcing firms, they'll tell you they know this. So they're all trying to become multidimensional, whether it's in cloud, whether it's in on the innovation curve for digital products, and so on. And I've had really mixed results in using outsourcing. Throughout my career for R&D. And if you look at what GE and other companies are doing, they're starting to bring R&D back to the U.S. And I think it's a real challenge for the outsourcers to do that. And I'll just leave with this note because it's a fascinating topic in my view. Is that during the downturns, there was a huge disproportionate release of middle management from companies. Right? And if you look at the outsourcing market, it's relatively new market. So you don't have these cross-industry, cross-technology generation people there in large quantities. So there's this, in my view, there's this middle management gap around creating valuable R&D and managing the R&D process, and then connecting the dots with the business and bringing those to life, right? So the outsourcers haven't solved that. They're gearing up to have enough critical mass there. U.S. blitzed a lot of them, and that's why I think. So to answer your question around the future, with it, the outsourcers, if they don't tie into the R&D and innovation curve, they're going to lose. Right? And it is a challenge in the industry to get that working smoothly.
I'm not a believer that it works at all. If you do the numbers, when I was at Sherwood International, it was a software company for life insurance. I saw New York Life fail on a $100 million project that they outsourced. We do some outsourcing right now at Evolution One in Belarus, and we're starting to pull that back. We spend millions of dollars with them each year, and it's interesting. I talked a lot about regulations in the beginning previously. We're getting actual specific contracts that basically say from major banks, we forbid you from having any offshore people work on our product. Well, we're assessed the cloud-driven product. It's everybody's product. So how can you separate one customer's product out of your cloud-based offering? So I sense that it's starting to come back. I had this debate a number of years ago with a CIO from India who was in the United States, one of the smartest guys that I know. He was a consultant he still is a consultant at a consulting firm, and we had this debate. And he said, well, outsourcing does work, it's good, cost justifiable. He says, I've done it. I said, okay. I said, tell me the situation at which you did it and it was successful. And he told me, well, now here's an Indian who spoke the language, and he said, okay, we opened up a company in India, so it's captive. And I said, well, that's the only way it works. I said, because you have somebody's, chain to pull, you can direct it, you can manage it directly. I said, but I don't see it happening, and the more I look at it, the less I like it, and I've never seen it work, in my opinion.
I think we have a couple of follow-up questions. Do you want to add anything to that, Len, before we?
I mean, are you primarily asking about outsourcing overseas?
Well, I was thinking IT function, for instance, either, to an offshore company or actually doing it overseas.
Yeah, so we don't do any of that.
Now, I'll just step in here because we have, I've had success with it. And it depends.
I don't believe it.
It really depends on how you value what success means, right? Now, from a financial standpoint, absolutely, right? However, you have to be prepared up front to explain what the productivity impacts could be. So it's not going to be this much of savings, it's likely to be like this. And then it takes a village to incorporate it and make sure it works, right? And I'm in an environment now where 90% is outsourced. It's too much. By the way, I think it's too much, but that's what it is. And then at S&P we brought it in and got into roughly the 50 range. It is a bear to manage, and for a lot of reasons. Everything from, I'm sure you've all experienced, from turnover to the rising costs and rates as you renew contracts and so on. So it's a very difficult thing to make work. I have had, I will say, Rick, if you took a look at all the metrics we had around that, it has been successful, but it is not as successful as the way it's often sold to the senior leadership team.
I just want to, I had a team of 200 people at GE, 12 GE employees, 25 local outsourced, and the rest between Mexico and India. And you have to live with it. Yes, it's got difficulties, but life is difficult. And turnover was the most interesting. We had more turnover among the GE people than the customers. Because the GE people were constantly looking for jobs, they were moving around too. So, you know what? There's lots of stories about this one.
Okay. Did you want to add something to that?
No, not to this, totally different comment. My question was about the human side or the interpersonal relationship side of it.
Before we go to your question, we have roughly 3 minutes left, and I promised we will stay on track. So, I will ask you to phrase your question in a way that allows it to be answered quickly.
So you have to accomplish a lot using technology to give a competitive advantage to your organizations.
Yeah.
But you all have stakeholders, either they're external or internal, and you have to, it's like herding cats, and it's about influencing without authority. You don't have any authority over your peers, the people that you're trying to support. Is that a big problem? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse?
I don't think it's gotten better or worse. It's probably stayed the same. And I'll be very quick on this. Technology is the easy part. Yeah, I've been in IT for 36 years. We all have more technology than we know how to use. How much of Microsoft Word do you use? Probably 10%. Excel, probably 5%. Technology is there. It's the ability for the people to adapt to it and to use it. And that's what EMR, perfect example. Technology works, doctors can't adapt to it. So nothing's changed in 36 years when it comes to that.
thoughts on that, Levin?
3 minutes. I got the message.
I gave you 2 minutes and 45 seconds back.
You know, I'll just tell you this. There's always a challenge in that many of your advocates and stakeholders, they also turn over. Your business changes constantly. You know? So I found there's no substitute for a good business case and to advocate for it, regardless of what it is, because there's so much change, et cetera. So I am always on point on what the business value will be. And and I stick with it until something changes where it's not. And I think that's how I kind of weather the ups and downs and stay with an even keel, is that I've got a really good firm business case and I can prove it. And advocating for it with a lot of passion. And understanding that if you do that, you might actually own it. So I think it's really helpful.
Trying to determine whether we go into the speed round on the last question. I've got, clock says we have about 3-4 minutes left. You know, take out the tissue and you know, shine up the little crystal, you know, silver vase in front of you. What do you think technology looks like in the next? What's the next generation of technology organization look like? We'll start with you.
Well,
3 minutes or less.
let me think about it for a minute.
All right, Joe's ready.
Oh, no, I'm not gonna say we're ready, always ready, but the way I view the future, and we've actually implemented some of that in the last couple companies, and I think you really need to think about this a lot, is that there's sourcing, if there's sourcing, there's cloud sourcing, there's resource outsourcing, et cetera. My belief is that the real value in the IT organization will be being the best at integrating capabilities in the world, right? And we went on that path in 2004, 5, started on that path at S&P, and from that comes all kinds of things. And I used to explain that to the business organizations, and I have a hard time saying business organizations because we were the business in a way, is that, you know, in the automotive industry, in the early days, everything was built by everything was proprietary and built for one assembly line. And you could get a Model T as long as it was black, right? And so as auto companies started to expand, they had more assembly lines, but they realized that the competitive advantage wasn't building a better transmission necessarily. It might be in the engine, or it might be in the electronics that grew. So what they focused on were the parts, building parts that were competitive advantage for them, and they sourced everything else. So they could have multiple assembly lines and bring things to market much quicker than competitors. And by the way, do it in such a way that saves money. Well, software development is becoming very much like that, where now we have the cloud infrastructure. I can go out and I can buy a fulfillment system, cloud-based fulfillment system, sales and marketing system, et cetera. But the real value is not only the capabilities all those bring, but how I integrate, how my teams integrate those and bring capability to the marketplace. And one of the biggest efforts we had at S&P was putting that global integration architecture in place so we can plug and play legacy workflow engines, content engines, large grid-based analytics. We could actually plug them in and out quite flexibly so we can bring capability anywhere in the world when we had to. And then that's the 3-minute version of very long.
Richard,
Long time.
anything you'd like to add?
I'll see if I can get this in a minute or less. I'm going to sound like the biggest dinosaur up here or the smartest visionary. So I will say this. Everything in IT is cyclical. So what did we call the cloud in the 1970s? It was TSO, time sharing option. What did we call the server farm in the 80s when it was a server farm? What did we call that in the 70s? We call that a mainframe. So if you want to look at the future, look at the past of IT. It's all going to come back. It's just and none of the problems actually change. It's the machines will work great, but you still have the people. So.
Any final
Well,
thoughts?
so, in healthcare, I'm worried about 600,000 people that we take care of, and that's what's in my master patient index. I think that we've got a broken healthcare system from the incentives and the payments, and it's not. And what needs to happen is we need to be focusing on what's important, and that's keeping people healthy. Now, in order for that to happen, people have to take responsibility. It was the insurance company, it was the payer, it was the business who gave the insurance, it's the government. So all of that is switching now. What I see over the next decade is everybody being connected in some way, and that includes my 600,000 patients in a real-time way, being monitored by their health needs with this type of stuff attached to us. It may sound really too futuristic, but we're getting to the point now where you don't need to go to a hospital for a sleep study. You can get a program for free on this. You don't need to go to an audiologist for a hearing test. You can get a program for 99 cents. You can have your EKG done on this thing. And basically you can have all your vital signs be monitored on a regular basis, and then we have to figure out from a big data perspective to be calling you saying maybe you better lay off that cheeseburger and fries. So I think that there's going to be so much. I spend a significant amount of my time now thinking about the patient portal. We have 13,000 people in it. I've just signed a contract to go up to 100,000 people, how we can start to interact with those people, getting them the information they need so they can take care of themselves better. So I see this massive thing where everything is connected with a bunch of standards that allow us to share information. Just even within the healthcare system, there's 20 or 30 different organizations in healthcare that all need this to take care of one patient.
Well, I would love to continue this conversation. I think it's been very insightful. I want to thank the panel for sharing your insights with us. I'd like to thank CTC for getting us together, and the audience for participating in this.